The heavens declare the awesome glory of God. Welcome back to the Greg Schreffler Show, where we talk about anything and everything that has God in it. Why? Because we gotta. Hope you like the intro music. It's called, what is it called? The Heavens Declare the Glory of God, written by Tim Rupert. As usual, I hope you're enjoying the one-on-ones as much as I'm enjoying putting them together. Don't forget, if you can, to support the show at Give, Send, Go or GoFundMe. And if all you can afford is prayer, Give, Send, Go allows you to do that. Just register and you can get updates on prayer requests that come out from the show for needs of the show. And if you can't watch, you can listen on your preferred podcast platform. All right, let's get it on. Welcome to episode 52 of the Greg Schreffler Show. And once again, we're doing another one of these one-on-one interviews. And why do these matter? Because they bring depth back to Christianity. You see, modern conversations about faith can often be shallow, emotional, and maybe even political. But these interviews, they go deeper. Theology, scripture, and real-life application. It reveals where churches may drift from the Bible. And it offers clarity to those confused or disillusioned. And best of all, the honesty in these interviews builds credibility and trust. So let us begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Glory of God. Day after day, the light breaks through, pouring forth speech in skies of blue. Night after night, the stars align, revealing knowledge pure and divine. No Director, founder of Winston Wins Ministry, former men's and missions pastor, owner of a local advertising company, public speaker, semi-pro photographer, bilingual musician, dancing stud, author, Mr. Tim Rupert.
I thought we were going to base all of this on truth. I don't know about the dancing stud. My wife will tell you. Yeah, I'm a real dancing stud.
All right, well, welcome to the show. Thanks for sitting down with me and taking a moment of your time, your valuable time to go over these things and answer some of these questions that I think have eternal consequence. So it's always good to get different perspectives. And I appreciate you coming down here, even with your bad back, and offering yourself, making yourself vulnerable for these questions. So
It is an absolute honor to sit here with you. No joke. I have a deep respect for you, and I love what you're doing here, and I think that this will be a lot of fun.
yeah,
And regardless of bad backs and all that, I was getting in the truck today, and I was like, how is it that my dad could outwork me when he was 57 and I was,
yeah.
golly, man, that was 25 years ago.
Oh wow.
And I'm looking at that going, that old man works circles around me, and I'm so stinking old right now. He's 85. I think he might could still outwork me. It's amazing. I don't know how he did it at 57.
Yeah.
He was a workhorse, man. They
didn't have as many distractions back then.
Maybe that's it.
Because
I think it's more like cars.
Because technology wasn't like in the palm of your hand like it is today.
True. Well, you know the old saying, right? That soft times make hard, or
Yes.
soft men, and hard
Yes.
times make hard men make soft
Yeah.
times make. Well, I think we are unfortunately the beginning edge of that. That we're making softer men. I'm a softer man than my
Yeah.
dad. I look at my dad and I'm like, man, I'm a wuss. I mean, I like doing manly stuff, shoot guns, firewood,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But shoot, man, I'm not half the guy he is.
All right, let's get started. The
Yep.
first segment is personal faith journey. So, was there a defining moment or season that deepened your faith?
Greg, I have been defined now for a number of years by a particular thing that happened in our lives. And should I take the moment to make the plug at this point, right?
Oh, yes.
So you said I was an author, right? So I wrote the Winston story. You can pick those up at thewinstonstory.com, real original.
There's a
I
children's
actually,
book
there
version
is,
too.
there is. There's actually three. There's a Winston's Promise that's designed for the guy who says, "Well, I'm not much of a reader," and he doesn't want to hear all my pontification and everything that happened and all my preachiness and stuff. And then there's a children's book called Winston Wins, and so if you've got little kids that want to hear a really cool story, all three books tell the exact same story. They're just targeted at different audiences, and so that kid that's older than he wants to listen to a children's book, but too young to dig through all the detailed things that happened in us, not just the story that happened to us. That Winston's Promise is more for that, or for the guy who just wants to read the story and doesn't care to hear all my elaborate thoughts. So in any case, that moment that answered the question that you asked: was there a thing that defined my faith, or challenged or helped me grow in the faith? To be quick about it, I was doing some ministry, as you mentioned earlier. I was a men's pastor, and I was doing some men's ministry, and I was doing stuff with my dog because God had challenged me with this dog. That Labrador Retriever was the best Labrador Retriever I'd ever had. He paid such close attention to me, and God told me one morning, or he asked me one morning, "Why don't you listen to me like he listens to you?" And I was like, "Whoa, that hurt."
Yeah.
I thought I listened to you, and then and moments later, after I got past that and was like, "Okay, I'll listen to you better." He went into the water. Water was frozen, and it was crazy. And he came back out, and he was just so excited about going again. And I was like, "Man, I mean, that dog doesn't care about how cold it was. I mean, it was way below freezing that morning, and we were just out there training." And he was just a year old puppy, so I mean, it was kind of crazy for him to be so geared up about it. But he couldn't wait for me to toss that thing back in that frozen water. And then God said, "Hey, and by the way, when you do what I ask you to do, why don't you do it with that kind of joy,
Huh.
regardless of the circumstances?"
Wow.
And man, I had to sit down and cry. And training was over at that point.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't take another one of those Mack trucks in the intersection.
Oh.
I was out here training dogs, and God's interrupting that and and teaching me, how to listen to His voice, how to be excited about listening to His voice, regardless of the circumstances. That's a tough lesson when you really unpack it. And so, and
Wow.
so,
That's amazing.
so I was doing that stuff with the dog, and then all of a sudden, 3 years in, the dog gets bone cancer. There's this huge challenge as to
Winston.
Yeah, that was Winston. And there's this huge challenge as to whether we're going to accept that what the doctors say, or whether we're going to believe what God has said, and that's what the whole book is about. But that story changed not just my life, but the life of my whole family, and now the lives of a lot of people. So
Yeah, and it had an impact on the vet too.
yes, in fact it's kind of crazy how it has sort of taken a very strange turn in the last couple of years. We have sort of a large ministry geared towards vets and vet students now. I've had the opportunity to go and speak to the Christian Vet Mission at UGA, which is the veterinarians that are Christians that will come to Bible studies and things like that. They have couple conferences every year, and I've had the opportunity to go to a CVA conference, and there's just Yeah, it's just a very interesting twist to this whole thing, and we're still impacting people.
That's awesome.
Just a few weeks ago, I had a lady call me, well, contact me from New Zealand that said her dog has cancer, and she got online trying to figure out whether it was appropriate to believe that God would heal your dog, and she found the Winston story.
Nice.
So that's happened, and a couple of more just in the last couple of weeks. There's a lady in California, there's a lady in Texas, there's some folks down in Florida, and they're all reaching out to me going, will you help me pray for my dog? I don't even know how to do this, but our
Yeah.
dog's been diagnosed with cancer, and we didn't, we weren't sure, but we felt in our hearts that God would heal our dog. Your story kind of validates that thought, and could you pray with us? So it's just an ongoing,
Yeah.
ever changing, ever.
So if you guys want to know more about the story, pick up this book,
The
The
Winston story.
The Winston Story,
Right.
and there'll be links in the show notes. You're also on the 700 Club, so that's pretty cool.
It's true, yeah.
So God did a lot of amazing things through Winston, and it's really, really awesome. So that's awesome.
I'm just a dumb old redneck Georgia dude. I can't claim any of it.
Yeah.
I don't even know why he's using a rusty old beat up tool.
He can use anybody, anytime, anywhere.
If he can use a donkey, he can use me.
There you go. That's right, man. That's right. All right. Next one is a biblical understanding and theology. Why is salvation through Jesus Christ alone essential to Christianity?
Well, this is a hot button for me. It doesn't touch back on where we'll be most of this interview with the Winston story. This is a completely separate issue for me. Specifically because...
Let me just say something right there.
Yeah.
So when I asked him to come on, the plug for the book was not anywhere involved in this interview.
Right.
So I'm the one that said that, hey, why don't we plug the book? So this wasn't all set up for the book plug or anything like that. It was just spontaneous, and there is a fantastic story and a heartwarming story in that book. So that's why we want you to check it out. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I appreciate you saying that. Because I've done ministry for so long, and I love to invest in men's lives. And you and I do a lot of backpacking, and we rub elbows with people of different denominational beliefs.
Yeah.
I guess that's
Yeah.
a safe word to use.
Yeah.
And I've got other friends that are spread out all over the spectrum as far as under the Christian quote unquote
Yeah.
umbrella. So that's why this is a hot button for me, because it boils down to this, that Jesus is enough. We can, as humanity, as humans, we cannot look at grace and salvation without going, surely there's more to it than that. Surely there must be something I have to do to earn, right? Because that's our culture, but it's not just our culture. That's just humanity. Is that every religion and thought process in the world understands you get what you pay for, right? You reap what you sow. What goes around comes around, right? So it's in our brains, and
Yeah.
that's a spiritual truth, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the scriptures do say you reap what you sow, right?
Yeah,
So-
and we're taught that you got to work hard, keep your head down, and if you do that, you will be rewarded, and usually that's a financial type of reward. But yeah, so yeah, that mindset is already there.
Right, and not only is it inbred into us and ground into us by our fathers or by society or by our jobs or whatever. Work hard and you'll succeed, or work hard and you'll pay and you get better pay and you benefit from working hard. That's the tough part when it says grace is free. All you have to do is accept it, and that grace in so many religions or I don't know. It's hard to say the words and be appropriate, but in so many aspects of it, people go, okay, I can accept the fact that grace and salvation is a free gift, but then surely I must do something to continue in that grace or to work it out or to maintain my salvation. And it's just not. Yes, are we supposed to live for Christ and live like Christ? Are we supposed to? Yeah, out of love, respect, and thankfulness and gratefulness for our salvation. But we're not earning our salvation. We cannot. You're a good guy. You can't be good enough.
Nope.
I'm a decent fella. I fail all the time, bro.
See, I'm just good, but he's decent.
No, I thought that was the opposite. You're a really good guy. I'm just decent.
Okay. But yeah.
So we can't earn our salvation, and there's no amount of things that we can do. Jesus is enough.
He's enough. And in one of my previous podcasts, I've talked about how it's like a plane ticket. Someone gave you a free plane ticket, but you still have to take the ticket and get on the plane. It's not enough for you to carry the ticket around.
That's right.
So you do have to, it does require for you to accept it, and it does require action on your part to live out that life.
But I love that analogy because you have to get on the plane in order to get from point A to B. But can you fly there?
No, you can't.
You cannot. All you can do is ride there.
Yeah.
That plane still has to be the plane that you got on, that you're going to get off, that transports you. You have to completely 100% rely on that plane. And that's Jesus.
Yeah.
He's the free gift. The ticket is there. You got to get on, but then you can't do anything at that point about it. Even if you were the pilot, you still can't do anything.
No.
To make that thing do its job.
So you can't show up to the plane without the ticket. So you do have to take the ticket.
Right.
And then after you get on the plane, you can't do anything. You can't do any works or anything like that. That's you just have to trust.
That's right.
Like you said,
plane has
to get there.
Do its magic.
Yeah.
It's got to be the airfoil.
Yeah.
Right? I love that analogy. Never thought about it, but I'm going to use it.
All right, next one. Segment 3, daily walk and spiritual discipline. How do you discern God's voice versus your own thoughts?
So I go back to what I was talking about with the Winston story. That first thing, that first moment of ministry for me and Winston was it really started that morning, early February 2015, when God said, "Why don't you listen to me with that level of intensity?" Those were the words that penetrated my heart. Why don't you listen to me with that level of intensity? Well, I didn't know exactly what that meant. I mean, I thought I listened to you, right? And so I was like, well, okay, I want to do that, right? What does that mean? And then that was a process then. And so my answer to that is practice. Right. We have to make it such a practice of interacting and communicating with God that we can hear those moments and go, was that me or was that God? And our spirit says, what? Of course that was God, right?
So flesh out for us what practice means.
That's hard, because when you start saying, I want to hear your voice, right? And we start, what did Paul tell us? Stay in the attitude of prayer all the time. That's tricky. When I'm walking around delivering coupon books because of my advertisement, I'm going to be doing the rest of the day. Do I stay in the attitude of prayer? And what I learned through the Winston story and all the time that was all that is like, oh, you know what? That's really not all that tricky. I get in the truck. He's in the truck. And I go, man, did you hear that lady be so rude to me? God cares about our every single detail and our every second, and he's right there with us all the time. And I just began to communicate with God like you and I are sitting here talking. And I believe that as you begin to do that, and you just start praying about everything, and you just talk to God about everything, he begins to talk back. through your spirit, and you start hearing his voice. So I fast forward 3 years after that moment of him saying, why don't you listen to me with that intensity? See, when the vet walked in and said, he's got bone cancer, he's got weeks to live, these are your options. We can cut his leg off tomorrow. That'll only cost you like $4,500. But we can cut his leg off tomorrow. That's going to give him like 5 or 6 months to live. Wow. Most of that time will be recovery, right? Or you can go to UGA and start doing chemotherapy, radiation therapy with him. That'll give you 12 months to 18 months, and that'll only cost $10,000 or $12,000 anyway. And so you can do, those are your two options. Otherwise, he's got weeks to live, and really, at best, he's got 18 months is what we're giving him. And so I'm sitting there, and then I hear God say to me, I care about a man and his dog. I had just said to my wife on the phone, I said to Karen, I said, I'm inclined to pray, but I don't know if it's appropriate to believe that God will heal my dog. See, I believe I can pray for you. And I believe you can pray for me. And we can pray for our mom, or we can pray for our kids. I believe in healing. I experienced that multiple times in my life. So I had no problem praying for a person, right? But I didn't know if it was appropriate to pray for our animals. I didn't know if God did dogs.
So you didn't know if it was appropriate, or you didn't know if you had the faith?
No, I really didn't know if it was appropriate. I had the faith.
Okay.
Because I had seen God do miracles. I just didn't know if God did dogs. I mean, I don't know how to explain that better than that. Because I was like, I was sitting there just going, I believe we can pray about anything.
Right.
Right? God will sit and listen to us, and we can ask for Lord knows what. But is it appropriate to believe, right, that if I ask God, when I get to the bank today to make my measly little $150 deposit, let there be $1 million in my bank account, right? I mean, is it appropriate? We can say it.
Yeah.
We could even say it with faith.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate to believe it? That was where I was at. Is it right for me to go, God, please heal my dog? Yeah, God will listen to your prayer. Was it appropriate for me to actually have faith that he would? And that was my hinge point. I was just like, I don't know. And in that moment, see, God spoke to me. He reminded me of a story where a guy's guitar was broken, and the guy was praying about it wasn't broken. It had a big scratch in it, a deep scratch in the surface of his guitar, and he was very upset. It was a very expensive guitar, and it was a brand new gift. He sat down at his desk, and he was very upset, and he just started praying, God, what am I going to do about my guitar? It was a gift from his wife recently. And God told him, get up and start rubbing that scratch. And it wasn't just a mark, it was a scratch. Rubbing that scratch with a cloth and pray over his guitar. He said, I felt like an idiot. I did it because I just felt like that's what God was telling me to do. And when I took the rag away, the scratch was gone. And so God reminded me of that in an instant. I had not thought of that thing that in 10 years. And in that instant, he just downloaded that whole story back into my brain again. And he said, if I care enough about a man and his guitar, I care enough about a man and his dog. So obviously the preaching point there is that God cares about everything that you do and everything that happens in your life. There's no detail too small. But I also found out that it was appropriate to believe God for your needs, for even your wants, right? Because I didn't need Winston in my life. I wanted Winston in my life. And it was important to me. And so if it's important to me, it's important to him. All that aside, I stood there and heard, while the vet was talking to me about cutting his leg off, I heard God's voice say, if I care enough about a man and his guitar, I care enough about a man and his dog. To me, I translated that to, I'm going to heal your dog. So before I even knew what I was saying, I said to the vet, well, I think I've got another option. And she was offended. You could see it all over her face. She was like, "Oh, you do,"
Yeah.
Like she didn't say that, but you could see it.
Yeah.
And her eyebrows raised as if like, "Oh yeah, what?" And I said, "I think God's going to heal my dog." And she said, "Well, if that makes you feel better." My office manager will be in to talk to you about your bill.
Yeah.
But had I not been preaching for 3 years,
Yeah.
listen intently to the voice of God and practicing that, I could have easily said, "That's just me. I'm just answering my own question because that's what I want the answer to be."
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people feared that for me for the in the next few months. They were afraid that maybe I was
Yeah.
just
I
saying.
think a key to a lot of what you just said is when we're asking God to do something, is the miracle or whatever you want to call it, is it going to bring glory to God? So even asking a dog or a guitar, like when your buddy's guitar was healed, air quotes, was he did he go out and share this? He could testify
The
about it.
very next morning.
So, that's the thing. Is God going to get glory from it? And obviously, through all the public announcements and the places that you've gone and the people that you've talked to, and you've been very vocal about it, and it's all been for the glory of God. And I think that is key when we ask Him something. So back to your $1 million question, maybe how would that $1 million glorify God? It's that kind of thing.
That's right.
Are you thinking about, well, I'm going to get a truck, I'm going to get a trailer, I'm going to get, those probably aren't the things that are going to come about.
That's
But am I going to like feed people? Am I going to, it's whatever. But
right.
I mean, that's the thing. How will God get the glory
Right.
from your prayer request? So yeah, that's key to remember when you're pouring your heart out to God. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, next, trials, doubt, and spiritual warfare. Have you ever experienced doubt in your faith, and how did you navigate it? And I guess that also ties in.
I think one of the very first times God showed me a miracle or did a miracle in my life, even that moment, right, just like that moment with the guy and his guitar was all pointed towards this time in my life and towards Winston. But I want to share with you this story, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. But I was going to a church. They did this thing at Easter where it was a huge presentation of Christ's life, and we would do it for 2 weekends in a row. In any case, I was singing a song called Miracles, and there was no particular reason for me to sing it other than that it needed a male voice and a female voice, and I fit the part, and so I was singing this song, and it was called Miracles, and it was telling about Jesus' doing miracles in his life, right? And it was a drama. There was actors, and they were
Okay.
acting out. It was really really pretty cool. So in any case, I'm singing this. That's my thing. That was the only part that I had in the whole play, so to speak. And Saturday morning, I get up, and that night I was supposed to sing, and I lost my voice completely. And I mean, like, I couldn't talk. And I did all the things that you're supposed to do: lemon water and honey, and and gargling with all the salt water and everything you're supposed to do to get your voice back. And 3 o'clock that afternoon, I show up at the church, and I go to the lady who's in charge. Her name, and she looks at me, and I say, "I can't talk. I can't sing tonight." Like that, and she's like panicking, right? And so it just so happened that we had this lady on the praise team there. She still has this crazy ability to know every single person's part. All right, she's just sort of an overachiever, and incredible voice, one of the best musicians and vocalists I've ever worked with and talked with and sang with. She says, Karen says to me, "Go tell Brooke right now she's got to sing your part," right? And so I go in there, I walk into Brooke's room, and she's in there practicing for her parts because she's got several parts. She's a great vocalist. And I say, "Brooke, I can't sing tonight. You got to sing my part, right? That's it. So she's like, oh no, well I need to practice it, whatever, you know. So I'm done for the night. So I'm dressed like this, you know. I'm walking around, and Brooke starts practicing her part. Everybody's in costume and getting makeup on and all that jazz. And so this guy, good friend of mine, a faith-filled brother. Rod was a probation officer, so he's all stacked up. You know, and when he speaks, you know, Rod speaks with authority. It was just part of his nature. Rod comes in and he goes, Tim, and I'm like, what? And so Rod says, you're anointed to sing that song, and you're supposed to sing that song. And I said, yeah, Rod, that's cool, but you need to tell somebody else besides me. And he says, sit down in this chair, right? And he says, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get some oil. So when Rod says, sit down in the chair, you sit down in the chair. So Rod sits me down in the chair. He comes back, and he's got 2 people with him, and he's got a jug of kitchen, like, cooking oil out of the kitchen. And he says, I couldn't find the anointing oil. This is going to have to do, right? And so they put their hands on this gallon of, and I'm like, how much anointing are we really about to do, right? He puts his hands on this gallon of oil, and he says, they pray over the gallon of oil. And then Rod puts it on his hands, and he just slaps it on my face, and he's holding my head, and he starts praying, and he prays a prayer, dude. I mean, I'm just sobbing in the middle of all that, and I'm sitting there. I don't feel anything. I don't hear anything. I don't hear angels singing or whatever. All right, so Rod gets done, and he goes, sing. And I go, I don't think this is good. And he yells at me. He's like, I didn't tell you to talk. I told you to sing. And so I start to sing, and I could sing. I couldn't talk, but I could sing. So he grabs me out of the chair, and he goes, we walk out into the parking lot, and Karen's out there. She turns around, and he goes, sing. He's got me by the arm. Yeah. Sing. So I sing, and Karen's, you know, her face is, holy mackerel, go tell Brooke, right? So he marches me into the room, and we bust open the door, and Brooke's in there practicing, and she's got that look on like, you know, how dare you? And she's a musician. And so she looks at me like, what? And Rod says, sing. So I sing, and her face the same thing. She goes, go get dressed, right? So I start to go get dressed, and by this time everybody's already dressed, and there's this room, and it's full of all the costumes, and I have to walk across this dark, empty room. It's full of everybody's costumes. There's no people in there, and there's no lights on in the room. I walk across, and I know right where my costume's hanging, and as I'm walking across that room, dead silent, God says, don't you ever doubt me again. Now, up until that moment, see, I struggled in my faith with, is this all real? You know, of course I've had doubts. I can't imagine any human.
Right.
I think if you looked at me and said, no, I never doubted my faith, I'd say, you're a liar, and the Bible says you're going to hell. How could you live as a human and have rational thoughts and hear the things that we hear as we're growing up and being educated, and the world throwing, there is no God, everything's evolution, millions of years, blah, blah, blah. They throw all that junk at it. How could we live in this world and not doubt at some point? But I struggled. Even as doing ministry and being a Christian, raised in a Christian home, I struggled with, sometimes I would just go, man, is all of this really real? Are we just going to die and that's just going to be it? I'm an analytical kind of guy. I want to know the whys, and I always have those kind of questions. Yeah, okay, I can accept it, but why? And God just said at that moment, don't you ever doubt me again. Dude, I sat down and it was like a steamroller, and I sobbed. I just don't think that I've ever doubted God again.
That's awesome.
So
That's awesome. I mean, if he can make a donkey talk, surely he can make you sing.
right, it's true. This time he made a donkey sing.
Yeah. There you go. Wow, that's powerful. And that is huge. I mean, it's easy to say you have faith, but to to believe it outside of yourself, and I've talked about this before in previous podcasts, is that we've replaced our faith with knowledge. You know, back in Jesus' day, they didn't have a lot of knowledge, but they had a lot of faith.
True.
And I would argue they had more faith than we did, because Jesus would come up and say, uh, not verbatim, but something to the effect of, "Your faith has healed you,"
Right.
or "As you have believed, so it will be done."
So it'll be done. Right.
I mean, can you imagine him saying that to us today? That would be tough. But yeah, it's there, and like he said, I did a podcast on the one where he talks about faith as small as a mustard seed. So it's sad. It's powerful in the sense that it's there and you can have it, but it's also sad in the sense that, you mean my faith is weaker,
Weaker and smaller.
smaller than a mustard seed.
Exactly.
But yeah,
That's
that's
exactly right.
that's a powerful thing. Good.
Yeah, I talk about that specific thing that he said, and he said that at two different times to the disciples, that if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could speak to the mountain. And I talk about that in the book because we have mountains in our lives.
Yeah.
You know, when we go to the doctor, I mean, I always preach this to the men when I'm talking about it, because, you know, for whatever reason, I feel like it attacks men more than it does women. But what's the worst diagnosis that the doctor could give you would be pancreatic cancer, right? When you walk in
For a man?
yeah, well, for anybody.
For anybody.
But
I think for a
don't know
man
why.
it'd be testicular cancer.
Well, yeah, I mean that would hit us harder, right? But a lot of people get over. They can cure testicular cancer,
Yeah.
or at least, you know, they say they can. But there's just no coming back from pancreatic. I mean that, because then it's just affecting your whole body, and everything's just going to eat itself away. And I mean, that's a death sentence to hear pancreatic cancer. That's a mountain. If you think about what is a mountain, it's a large, ominous, immovable object.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what Jesus was saying. Those things that seem large and ominous and immovable, you can speak to those things with faith, and you can make them move. And we've been given that authority. We just don't exercise it.
No, we don't.
You know,
because we don't have the faith.
well, as he said, let it be done as you believe, right? That's our problem.
Yep.
We want to believe.
Yep.
One of those moments when Jesus said to his disciples, right before that, he was talking to a dad.
Yep.
That-
In fact, I did a podcast just about that very same thing.
Really, about the dad with the
About
kid.
the dad.
Yeah.
And he said, if there's anything you can do. And I went on to joke about, wait, did he just drop the if bomb on Jesus? You know?
Yeah.
And Jesus' response, if,
If.
like, psh, 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 psh. So
This was a sarcastic.
it was
man,
like
it was sarcastic.
a major
I like it.
insult,
It was.
And then, but the father's response was key, because we need to have the same reaction. And he immediately said, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief.
Right. And I think that's the most real statement in the entire New Testament. I believe.
Right.
Help my unbelief.
Yeah.
I was there. Everybody that calls me that says, "Will you please help me pray with me for my dog?" They're there. They're right there. I believe. Help my unbelief, because we're covered and smothered and diced and chopped with unbelief.
Well, because we've accepted knowledge over faith.
Right.
And that's, I don't want to take too much time, but that is such a powerful point, and the faith aspect. And I want to mention the fact that he looked at that vet in the eye and said, there's another option. In other words, we would like to go up to a cripple on the street and say, in the name of Jesus Christ, get up. But what's happening in our heads before we even get to that person is, well, if it doesn't work, I make God look bad, and I may cause emotional pain for this person.
Ooh,
So now we've already defeated ourselves.
that's exactly right.
But to have that faith where you just walk up, to have that faith like you just did, where you just said to a vet who's had schooling and doctrine and science all behind them, and say, no, God says something else. That's, I envy that. That's really cool.
Well, like I said, if you're married, you know what I'm about to say. when your mouth starts speaking words before your brain engages, if you're a guy and you're married, you know exactly what I'm saying. And I was right there, dude. I can't claim some super faith that made me step up and go, well, I think this. I just said it. To be honest with you, there was a part of my brain going, what are you doing? What did you just say to her? She's the scientist.
Yeah.
Right? But it was said, so it was out there.
That's
And
pretty
God,
cool.
I drove away there going, God, you gotta really do something now. You gotta show out.
Wow. All right, that's good stuff. Let's move on to the next one, segment 5, living out the faith. So, how do you respond to people who challenge or reject your belief?
Well, this kind of speaks a little bit back to what you were just talking about. We're called to do certain things, right? Ultimately, every single thing that we're called to do really finally funnels down to this one thing. Jesus said, if I am lifted up, I will draw all men unto me, right? So everything that happens in our lives, whether it's a miracle or whether it's God blessing you financially or whatever happens, all those roads finally lead to that one place. And then we have to decide, are we going to lift up Jesus, right? If we lift up Jesus, then he'll draw men to him. So if God is glorified in whatever happens, then we are lifting up Jesus. And if that's the case, the promise is that he'll draw men. We don't draw men. That's not our job. Our job is to lift up the Father. So when people, because I've had people look at me, I was at a vet conference, dude. That, I would say 70 to 80% of those people were atheists or agnostic or just, completely indifferent towards it. I had a lot of people look at me and go, really?
Yeah.
I literally had one vet look and say, what did you really treat him with? And I said, prayer and oil. and they were like, so I got a lot of people that think I'm crazy, and that's okay. All right. That's not my problem.
Right.
It's not my job.
Right.
Their end result is his job and his problem.
Yeah.
I hate to, that's kind of crass to sound like, well, God, that's your problem.
No, I don't think so.
But the end result is, that's his.
I say the same thing to people about tithing. I said, you give your 10% and then above and beyond for your offering, and you give it to God. You don't give it to the church. You give it to God. Right. So if you find out years later that the church was cheating all this time, you say it's not your problem. It's God's problem. And you don't get angry or bitter about it because you didn't give to the church. You gave to God. Right. You did what he required.
Well, and we'll talk about this in the next few questions. But when we work in obedience, the end result is not our problem. So if God says, go pray for that person or go speak to that person, whether God heals that person at that moment or not is not really, it really doesn't have anything to do with us. And I believe that our faith does matter. I believe that, Peter and Paul, when they walked into the gate and the guy was there and they said, I don't have anything else to give you but get up and walk, right? That was all about their faith. That dude didn't even ask to be healed. Probably, truth be known, may not have wanted to be healed because that's all he had known as a career. That was his source of living, right? But he was happy that all of a sudden he could walk. And so, but at the same time, that result, while it was dependent upon their faith, was really about lifting up God, and it was really God's deal.
Right.
And it was on him.
Yeah.
And we have to remember, we've just got one job to do. Lift up Jesus.
There you go. Yep. All right. We'll be right back after. All right, a second question to that is, what does forgiveness look like in practice?
So this was another hot button for me because I believe that God gave me the gift of forgiveness. I don't know if that's I don't know if you call it a spiritual gift or
Hmm.
not, because we're all expected to forgive, right? But I'll just say this: do you? This is one of those if then things. We don't have many of those in Christianity that God says, if you do this, then this will happen, right? And forgiveness is a tough one because because God says, in the same manner that you forgive is the same manner you'll be forgiven, right? And I mean, you realize how much power He puts in our hands? Then you bind things on earth. That when He's talking about you bind things on earth and they'll be bound in heaven, that's in direct relation to the sentences that were just right before that, and then talking about forgiveness. When He says, you forgive somebody, you loose something on earth, and it's loosed in heaven. He's giving us such incredible power over other people's lives and also in our own life. Do you want to walk in forgiveness from the Father? Absolutely, I do. Then you better demonstrate forgiveness and walk in grace with all the people around you. Do you want God to hold on to one thing and go, I can forgive all those things, but that, I'm so sick of that? You know? No, because I'm bound to do that over and over and over again. If whatever that is, I'm surely I'm going to be stupid enough to just keep doing it. And no, so I want God to wash me completely clean. I don't want a single sin for Him to look
Right.
down and go, that's one that I just can't do. So I just can't do that in my own life.
Yeah.
And I have to release people. And then God throws this weird caveat. Have you ever come across this where you read that verse that says, and I wish I remember the exact context, but you can Google it. So it says, when you're at the altar, about to give your sacrifice or
Oh,
give your
yeah.
alms, right? If there's a brother that holds something against you, leave your offering, right? So I deal with this in the book. There's a whole thing about it, but it says leave your offering, go fix it with your brother, come back, right? So there was a time literally in my life that I was literally walking up to the altar to put our tithe in the bucket because they did that sometimes. And I go up there, pray about our business, pray about our life, whatever, put our tithe in the bucket, walk back and when I get up there and I get on my knees and I start to pray, God says, I don't want your tithe. I'm like, what? What? That's the weirdest thing you might have ever said to me. I don't want your offering. It's no good to me right now. And then He brought me back into, this guy has something against you. Now listen to this. I didn't do anything wrong to this guy. I told the guy he needed to be in church and have his family in church. That's all I told him. But he was mad. He was offended because I had spoken truth into his life. People don't want you to speak truth into your life.
Yeah.
And I had spoken truth into his life and he was angry. And God said, he has something against you. I don't want your offering. It just so happened that it was a time of the year that if I went to him like the very next day and said, I want you to forgive me, right? I was very afraid that he would think that I had ulterior motives because it was hunting related. All right. So I had to wait until hunting season was over.
Really?
So I go home and I tell Karen, look,
Wow, that must have been gnawing at you for the longest time.
for 3 months. I said to Karen, I said, listen, start saving our tithes. I don't care if you open up another account or whatever, just start saving our tithes. We can't tithe until I fix this, and I can't fix this until March. It was insane. And when I called him, I was just like, I just want you to know, I never meant to offend you. I love you as a brother, and please forgive me, right? Greg, I didn't apologize for saying it. It was the truth. What I apologized for was being offensive. And I said, I love you, and I asked for his forgiveness, and he did on the phone. Man, yeah. And I even heard back from friends that he spoke, of going, man, I can't believe he called me and said that and blah blah blah. And it was just whatever, no big deal. I just did what God said do, right? But God said, I don't even want your tithe. That's all about forgiveness, dude. And if he can control my life by holding me through his own unforgiveness, what kind of power do we hold in others' lives when we choose not to forgive, or to just don't ever make it happen?
Right, right.
It's huge.
It is huge. And to be quick, we've talked about forgiveness before, and you remember when you forgive someone, that you don't doesn't mean you have to continue to have a relationship with them.
It's true.
But like Tim said, in order for us to be forgiven, we need to forgive others. Plus, there's a secular side of forgiveness. There's actual physical science behind forgiveness.
That's right. That's right.
So God's teachings are always for our benefit, and most of us look at them like bars that we have to break out of, but they're guardrails to keep us from going over the cliff. But anyway, let's move on. Next, culture, society, and truth. What are the biggest spiritual challenges facing believers today? Hold on.
Challenges for believers today? Believing that God will do what he says he's going to do. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have. It's just like what we've been talking about. It's like
Believing that God will do what he said he'll do.
yeah, I think in our world, our spiritual authority and position as children of the Creator of the universe, heirs, joint heirs with Jesus. That means I'm his brother. What kind of position does a prince have in a kingdom, right? And if that's where we are, then what in our life identifies that, right? And that should look like power. What did Jesus say to the disciples when he said, go into Jerusalem and wait until Pentecost? He said, because you will receive power. What's power for? All right? Because our world needs signs. If we do signs and wonders in our world.
But do we have to define power?
Well, no. We don't necessarily have to define it, but we just know that that's a part of the physical aspect of it. You know what I mean? Power means a lot of different things, right? Power to forgive. It can mean a lot of things, right? But one of the attributes is definitely the fact that we have dominion over many things in our world that we just don't take dominion over. So we get beat up on a regular basis by the enemy from every aspect that he can beat us up, from physical ailments to emotional and problem, and financial burdens, and all these things. We get pounded by the enemy, and we just don't ever take authority in it because God said we can. So we don't believe God will really do what he says he's going to do. I think that's where we struggle as a church.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to say, I think that's where we are today. Do you believe the Word of God or not? I mean, it seems like it's really come down to that. It sounds so silly to say because every superficial Christian will say, well, of course I believe the Bible.
Right.
But, believing and doing are separate.
Right.
I believe that my car will start.
Right.
Okay. But I got to go and start my car, or I believe this chair will hold me. I got to sit in the chair. I mean, it's just, we got to, that's an interesting point to say that is a challenge that believers face, because usually people say, well, social media or all these other things that they might list out as a challenge that people face. But no, that's very interesting.
The fact of the matter is we can use everything that the world uses actually to glorify God.
Yeah.
The intro music, right, is AI intro music, and AI helped me write the words, and my brother. Let me throw out my little, blog for my brother. He helped me write those words too, and then AI did all the music. I can do that.
Yeah.
But it glorifies God.
Exactly.
And I'm going to use it in an astrophotography video, and it'll glorify God. And it's rocking too. I like going down the road listening to Psalm 8,
Yeah.
and I don't think that those kind of things are challenges for us. I think if we just believed what we're told we could believe,
Yes.
all those other things would not really be a big challenge.
That's a good
for us.
point. All right, we got to move on.
Yeah.
Leadership and calling. How do you guard against pride in ministry? Did this ever come up when you were going through the Winston story? Did pride ever come up?
Yes, 100%. And I got to be honest with you. Let me be transparent. I have always struggled sometimes, and so I dealt with that also in the book, because when you're believing, especially for something like healing, right? Then Satan's going to attack you on two different fronts. The first thing he's going to do is try to attack your faith, right? And he's going to be like, "Are you kidding me? Right? Do you actually believe you can walk in there and put your hands on that person and they're going to be healed? Well, you're an idiot." Right? I mean, that's
Right.
the first thing we hear.
Yeah.
What if you don't? What if nothing happens? You're going to look like a total fool.
And you made God look bad.
And you're going to make God look bad. He knows how to use that.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So if we overcome that, all right, and we just go, I don't care what people think. Right. I'm going to do what God says for me to do. And I've met the two of the three criteria for watching miraculous things happen in my life, and I'm going to get to that. There's three. One is faith, right? Second is obedience, right? And so if I conquer the faith and the obedience part, and I can walk into a room and just go, look, I need everybody to leave out of this room. Me and this dude are going to deal with this, and I believe God's going to heal him. Please leave. Right? That's a big step. You put your hands on the guy, you anoint him with oil, you believe, everything like that. And what happens if he's healed? And I've experienced this. Miraculous healing. The next thing that Satan says to you was, whoa, look at you. You must have something special. And it's very easy. And I believe that when you see ministries grow and doing things and everything's going right, and then suddenly something spins badly out of control, and what does the world do? Oh, they were fake from the get-go.
Yeah.
And you're like, no. That was real.
Yes.
Okay? But Satan got a hold of that guy, and he put his hands on it, or he started needing, I need this attention, or I need to be bigger or greater, or blah, blah, whatever that was. And pride has a big deal with that. I think that's the next phase of Satan's attack. So the third leg of that is humility. I can have all the faith in the world. I can do all the obedience. But if I'm not humble, I'm going to screw this up. Right? If I don't keep in perspective, I absolutely cannot do a single thing other than just what he tells me to do.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely not got anything to do with me.
And it's so frustrating because we're bent towards pride. We're bent towards sin. We're just, it's a constant pull. So it's a constant battle. So, but yeah.
But Greg, that goes all the way back to the very first and second question about our salvation, right? Because pride is what tells us that I have to do something. Surely not. Grace is not just sufficient. Surely this has to involve me doing something. That's works righteousness, right? And if we've got works righteousness, then it's all about taking the glory from God and putting it back on Tim and Greg and going, yeah, I know God got it started really good, but look how well I have maintained my salvation. I've done all the things that the church tells me I have to do. Come on, man.
I mean, we see where this goes in the life of Saul. Yeah, he put himself in front of God. He started out pretty good, but then he got ahead of himself. So, all right, next one: legacy and eternal perspective. If you could share one truth about God with the world, what would it be? Seems like you already have, but
It is that no matter what happens in your life, no matter how insignificant you think it is, how small it is, how much Satan tells you that doesn't matter, God doesn't care about that. If it's important to you, it's important to God. It is the thing that I've been preaching since Winston was healed, since God spoke to me and said, write the book.
do you think that needs to be quantified when you say if it's important to you? Because someone could say, well, getting my next fix is really important, or
I
getting
don't think that's important to God.
your next fix, your next drug intake, your
It's important. It's just important on a different perspective, right? It's important to him to go, how can I save you from that? Right? That's vitally important,
yeah.
right?
If you look at it from that point, yeah,
Yeah. So, you know, and I hear what you're saying, right? We can abuse that,
exactly.
right? And you have to quantify that and go, well, when you pray for the Father's will in your life, right? Because but very often, if we're up against a struggle like that, we know what God's will is.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
can pretend to even fool ourselves, but we ain't
right,
fooling nobody,
right.
right? And we're certainly not fooling him. And I think what I mean then by that though is that clearly, if if you are chasing Jesus and it's important to you, what happens is Satan comes in and goes, don't even bother. You're nothing.
Yeah,
Right? You're just a speck in this huge universe. Look how small you are. And God says, yeah, he is very, very tiny. And if that was the only speck in the universe, I would still have gone to the cross for him. That's that's the most incredible statement
yeah,
that we could ever really truly grasp. Is that it doesn't matter how small, and God wants to be involved in that in our lives. Even if we've got struggles and we think it's important to us, God wants to be involved in that struggle. He doesn't want it to, remain in your life. He wants
right,
to be involved in the ripping out
right,
and the roots of it and everything.
right,
But he wants to
right.
be involved in it.
What is the one lie the world believes about God that needs to be corrected?
Have you ever read Mark Rutland's book Behind the Shimmering Mask? You would love this, I think. It's written like a fictional story, like he's a professor and gets visited by these two angels, and it's the archangel Michael and Satan, and they're there to debate the seven deadly sins. Really cool perspective, right? And Satan, is spinning all of these, why the seven deadly sins are just tyrannical. Michael is answering them from heaven's perspective, right? And so I read it years and years and years ago, and then one of the great things about having a terrible memory is you can pick back up, 5 years later and go, I don't remember a single bit of this. This is just as good the second time as it was the first time because the shock factor is still there. So I'm actually reading it again right now. And so when I saw that question, I was like, God's a tyrant. That's what the world believes about. And Satan starts the book off with just ranting about the tyrant. And that's what our world has turned him into. And it's just because of the lie of Satan.
Right.
It's directly from the script
Right.
of the book. I was like, Dr. Mark, sorry, Dr. Mark, you were so spot on when you wrote the very first intro and he comes in and starts ranting about the tyrant. That's what the world believes, that God's just a tyrant.
Yes, that's so true. But then you have to ask, why would a tyrant die for you, right?
Yeah.
So, man, I really appreciate you coming down and talking. It's been really cool having you on the show and sharing your faith and sharing the Winston story. And don't forget to check that out. You can see it on the screen behind us, and you can check it out in the show notes. But yeah, this has been great, man. Thank you so much.
It has been an honor.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
See you.
So, in closing, I'll say this as you listen to the rest of Mr. Tim Rupert's music. So, are you thinking that conversation was just about one man's life journey? But could it also be a mirror? A mirror for all of us to ask, where do I really stand with God? Not where I think I stand and not where others assume I stand, but where do I actually stand with God? What kind of faith do we have? Well, hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out with me. Don't forget to leave a review. Tell me what's going on with you. Get your family to subscribe. Get your neighbors, brothers, sisters. Well, that's family. Get your enemies. And until next time, stay safe.